The voice of reason.
That's you, Gary. You are the voice of reason.
Yeah, I don't think so. You must have me confused with my twin.
All right. All right, ready to kick it off here. So Jim, I'll let you do wins of the week. Michelle's got the gender reveal coming up next week. And
No, is it next week? Oh my God, I don't even know where I am. I guess it is next week.
Yeah, it's
all right.
and we're gonna do a poll. You can either go with pink or blue, and then based on that, Jim is going to be in a SaaS Alerts new blue or a very faded red shirt.
Are we going to call him her? I mean, him her then?
And then we'll introduce I'll introduce Chris Loehr and we'll get on into today's topic around. So Jim, the floor is yours on.
Okay, great. So thanks, Andrew. Thanks everyone for being here. So just would love to hear if anyone has some wins of the week. I was told we have some good ones offline this week. So hopefully folks are here to share.
By the way, Jim, maybe you greased the skids. Were there any good ones in the SOC, as it were, this week with you and Chip? Chip, did you have any exciting or interesting things that you got to see?
Well, there are always things that we get to see that are interesting. I'm not sure I would necessarily out any particular partners unless they want to bring it to the floor. One of the most interesting things this week was actually engagement from an internal team member who came up with several different takes on impossible scenario travel modeling in Respond. So that was one of my favorite wins of the week for us as an internal team, just seeing somebody that I'm not accustomed to them digging in and thinking about those things because they have a whole nother set of responsibilities that take up a lot of their time. And I don't know, I think he must have been, lying awake at night, deciding between another glass of bourbon or putting his thinking cap on, and he dug into some pretty interesting notions. So I would expect to see some things trickling forward and some new templates based upon the dialogue that we had around that.
Okay, that last week was great as far as for sussing out some ideas on Respond. That was for sure. So, all right, who anybody have some interesting scenarios that they might want to share? Gary, any good stuff on your side again? Or?
No, did a great review session a couple of days ago looking at the logs from whatever that was, I guess 10 days ago from our breach. The good news is the forensics team that's looking at the environment has not come up with anything any more significant.
Okay.
But as a result, we enhanced some of our Respond rules, looking for a couple of extra tidbits with bad IP/VPN connections, and also a set of rules around people going into their my sign-in and account settings pages, where you go adjust the security settings for Office 365. We saw signs of those and kind of decided that it's often an area where people will go, and most of our clients have no idea what's in there, so it's a good thing to know that they're in there. But when we looked at the logs, there was actually one thing that came out that was very interesting, which is the threat actor screwed themselves and tried to double dip, as far as we can tell. So the threat actor for the first 3 days was connecting through one of a couple of VPNs that were flagged as suspicious, and we now would alert on that. But on that Friday, D-Day, we suspect that the threat actor tried to sell the working credentials because there were 2 logins from Singapore that were successful logins from different IPs. And it was that combination, along with the email forwarding rule within a day, that triggered our critical alert. So had the threat actor not done that, and we don't know, we're making that assumption that it was a different person. But had he not done that, the forwarding rule alone may not have triggered a critical alert. It would have been in our myriad of tickets that we get every day, but may not have been noticed because it would not have stood out.
Gary, can you just, for Chris listening in here, because I'd love for you to reiterate this when we start into the IR side of our conversation, but was VPN access normal for this customer? Like,
No.
Okay.
No, well, no, not through VPNs. Interestingly, there are lots of connections through the Microsoft data centers, which report similarly because they're an Azure hosted customer. So the extra IPs do show up, but not necessarily through VPN.
Got it. And that's, Chip, I think what you were pointing out is that additional functionality you could put in Respond to say if it's from a VPN, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you have a lot of flexibility there. So for instance, we've talked about this in the past, but all of the major cloud vendors, Microsoft, Google, AWS, often they have big chunks of their address blocks that come back as known bad actors because there's so much threat activity coming from them. Many partners use Respond rules that are looking for VPNs, Tor network, that sort of stuff. But they explicitly exclude the ASN surrounding Microsoft or Google from that trigger, and allow that data to pass because they know so many of their customers are connecting there. So, it's a balancing act, quite frankly, between how tight you want your rules to be, but that's why they're flexible and can be established by any partner in any way they choose.
Yeah, but the interesting thing that, like, when we were just kind of talking about the scenarios and some of the observations that were made, one of the things that was mentioned is many threat actors are spinning up like trial Azure environments and working from there. So, what good is whitelisting them? But it's looking at, the combination of stuff, which is really the key.
Yeah, Gary, I completely agree with you, by the way, that if you're going to whitelist Microsoft, you need to actually do it very specifically to the cross data center regions where we see data moving. People out of Toronto and going to New York and DC, people from the EU shifting to Dublin and vice versa, and people from Oceania hitting Singapore and Australia, vice versa. There are known pairs of file activity transfers between Microsoft data centers that that are pretty recognizable, and everything else should be treated as suspicious because your individual end users should almost never be accessing 365 tools from within a Microsoft environment. There is a rare case, obviously, if they're using VDI services provided by Microsoft and they're actually hitting Microsoft from a different Microsoft data center with a terminal services session, and that's how their company's configured. But that's a pretty rare situation, and even that you can actually narrow down the rules to make them super fine.
Yeah, one of the things that we've wrestled with is how to deal with events. And right now we've been just alerting on it and creating those critical tickets, which unfortunately don't always get seen immediately. So what we decided to do is something in the between, which is in the event of any of these triggers, we're going to basically disconnect the sessions, which will force the user to at least re-authenticate, giving us time to look at it, forcing them to reset passwords and all that without us calling them. We just felt like could be, people could get a little bit more pissed off. We've got some cranky users on these systems. So we decided to just do the disconnect of sessions. They'll get an innocent login prompt and not know why necessarily until we contact them.
Yeah. So when you say disconnect, you mean you're revoking the session tokens?
Yeah, we're gonna. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
And And that makes sense, because if it is a session token hijack, the guy's not gonna be able to get back in with that particular session cookie.
Right.
And he probably won't have compromised the account through traditional means of brute force attack. Hopefully all your customers are MFA protected, so now you've
Well,
established.
they were not, and that was part of the problem. And as we've dug in deeper, we're pretty convinced that it was a phishing email with a man-in-the-middle credential hack or stealing those credentials. That's all we can tell at this point.
Yep.
And IR was brought in this one, in this.
Yes,
Right?
correct. They're still doing their audit. The only thing that they found that we didn't look for and missed was that the threat actor installed an app cleverly named N into the user's system. Don't know what it did, but we just immediately deleted it and tossed it.
So when you say an app, you mean an enterprise app in
Yep.
Entra?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, so we're gonna start. We will start restricting those apps.
Yeah, big
that-
piece.
What's that?
That's huge. We'll talk a lot about whitelisting. Chris, maybe I'll shed some light on that. Even tools like, if you know, hey, we never run this type of remote control, right, Chris? I mean, living off the land is one of the, key things that threat actors are going to do.
Yeah, because that's how they avoid detection, right?
Yeah.
They just live off the land and it looks normal. And the other thing though we've seen where once they're in, they install their own app. They install apps that let them in. So if you're not paying attention to those apps being installed, and it's just like you're just not paying attention to it, those guys are figuring out ways to install apps to do
the interesting
do their
thing,
jobs.
So to help fight that, ThreatLocker's now come out with, or they're coming out with an enhancement, which now ties into 365 to bring in and I don't know enough about, I'll infer, they're bringing zero trust up to the 365 environment. And I don't know how much overlap there is going to be with SaaS alerts, but I do believe that they'll have the ability to prevent things, not just report on.
That's pretty interesting what you just put in chat. Andy, I know you have your hand up, but so Chip, that's, you guys can alert on installations as well.
Yeah, so there's multiple ways that enterprise apps can get installed. One of the most common is using an OAuth sequence in order to do that. That's how you guys actually connect SaaS Alerts enterprise app into your customers. And we do pick up all of those already and provide an event for that. We've been investigating for about the past 2 weeks how we can look at the audit logs on the enterprise app and look at service principal installations, which work a little bit differently. And we've had multiple requests. I know Amanda already has a development ticket issue for developing an enterprise app report that can be run on demand and then provided to the customer. So there's quite a lot in this realm of enterprise apps that we're working on, because they have become, a favored new vector for the living off the land piece. Not necessarily initially getting there, but once you're there, sticking around in the tenant, living off the land and getting up to more havoc.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're often, often for persistence, obviously either, like Chris, we've seen that often, right? That's going to give them kind of some type of backdoor, not the only reason they'll be installed, but certainly one of them to keep like a C2 in there, isn't it?
Exactly right. Yeah, and sometimes more than one. So if somebody thinks, oh, I found one, I shut it down, they just have another one ready to go. So yes, very common.
Andy.
Yeah, thanks for calling on me. Chuck and Jim, I want to ask you this. Gary Pica has a process called My IT Process, which allows us to apply standards to managing customers. What is really coming up out of Gary's incident and our incidents that we hear and discuss on the phone is that there are methods that could be clearly defined that we could if we could create a SaaS process, for example, and begin to help us define respond rules and adapt and have that change that'd be very powerful for us group, because what I'm experiencing is discovery of new capabilities or new awareness each week. And I don't have a way to say, hey, do I have all these covered, or do I need to talk about these with our clients and say, this is why we're implementing this new respond rule or unify piece, right?
It's almost like, and Chip, I'll turn it back to you. Like the analogy I'm hearing Andy talk about is like, like take Roost. There's, I'm air quoting a marketplace where it's like, hey, here's an automation. Oh, I could use that automation. Is there that kind of library or marketplace or genre, if you will, that could be allowable?
Well, that's what templates are about in both Respond and Fortify, is making at least the front end of detection and remediation, as well as policy orchestration, available, with it right within SaaS alerts. I mean, we definitely don't have the bandwidth as a business right now to be doing full run book development and policy and practice viz development for MSPs. I mean, that's something that I think, a lot of our MSPs do on their own and share amongst each other.
Where I was going with this, Chip, is that you continue based on the information you observe in the logs and other partners, you begin to establish and evolve new tactics, techniques, and processes, right? And I'm saying if we had a way to have that kind of libraried, not anything other than, by the way, this VPNs are now commonplace. That doesn't have much value any longer. You might want to hone in on these particular pieces. I'm just trying to find a way to keep up, is what you're hearing from me on these different evolutions of things. And this call is very helpful for that. But I also want to try to improve the quality assurance of with our customers. And
So Andy,
SaaS.
Andy, so you think an integration between SaaS certs and my IT process would
It
answer?
doesn't have to be an integration, but giving us a guide to follow. My IT process is truly just a generic set of questions that help you measure compliance.
Mm-hmm.
And from a SaaS alerts perspective, compliance, at least as my experience, is an evolving process that really changes almost quarterly, as frequently as monthly, as we become aware of new tactics that are being implemented. And how could we adapt to that with the respond rule? I was actually going to say, can we do a special event just around respond rule creation, where we apply what we've learned from these scenarios and go to town with them, instead of, hey, we can use this template. Let's actually build this and do this as a group and have people share ideas. That was where I was going. But then I thought the My IT process, a more structured method, might be better.
It's almost like, Jim, it's like, if you, again, I'm not versed enough in the templates, but here are all the ones of VPN obfuscation, and you could go through and see those, you know what I mean, Jim, look at live sorts that would be, and then we could do role plays. Okay, well, why would you use this respond rule? Well, because remember Gary's incident with his threat actor. The threat actor did this, and this. This respond rule would have, alerted Gary immediately because it was VPN, it was this. Yes.
So what is happening is we're trying to follow, at least for me, I'm trying to follow all these evolutions and awareness that other people get. And I have no one place to go to say, this is what's latest evolving. I need to incorporate this. This is a CVSS 10, for example, right? And this is a 3. And how do I get those kind of feeds so that we could adapt our respond rules or talk to our customers about why this needs to be implemented, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah.
So I'm just putting that out there based on what I've been hearing the last couple of weeks. This is something I think would really help the community.
One of the things that we're announcing next week, and Michelle's going to talk about the big reveal. So I think this is a good segue. What we launch and reveal next week will put us a lot closer to being able to help in that capacity.
Awesome.
All right, well, let's just check if there are any more wins of the week now that we've been inspired once again by Mr. Harlem and Andy. Any others that that you all had out there?
If I'm inspiring people, we're in trouble.
You're too self-deprecating, Gary. You really are. You're one of the legends in this business. Any others? All right. All right, Michelle, the big gender reveal. What's
The
happening?
big reveal. I'm not revealing anything today, but I'm encouraging you to attend next week's SASE call, where Jim will reveal a new service offering, and anyone who attends will receive an exclusive special offer. And I think that's all I can say. So I don't want to reveal too much. So
No pun intended.
just join us next week.
All right. Sounds good. All right, Chris, can you hear us okay? And are you in a dry place?
I am in a dry place and I can hear you well.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, we appreciate you, man. Thank you for taking time. You've been on, I think I've seen you in multi-cities over the past few weeks, and you've been on the road nonstop. So I appreciate you taking a few minutes. So Chris, let's do an intro first, and then we'll get on into today's discussion around incident response.
Sure. I'm Chris Loehr. I work for a company called Solis Security. We're based in Austin, Texas. We're an incident response and managed security service provider. We also, a few years ago, were acquired by one of the largest cybersecurity insurance providers, along with other lines of insurance that they do. CFC based out of London, and that's where I am today. So happy to be here and share anything that I can know.
Awesome. Well, we're gonna, you and I are gonna have a bit of a chat here, Chris, and I'm gonna put up some kind of a guide on our questioning today. But what I wanted to first let out everybody else in the audience know, we want you to participate, right? You have literally somebody that's been in the thick of incident response and has worked with MSPs for multi-decades now. So a quick story. Chris was his daughter is a Division I soccer player, and he's like, hey, I'm going to be in Tampa. This is when his daughter was a senior, being highly scouted, and Chris and I met up on a Saturday at a Starbucks after one of his daughter's games, and lo and behold, it actually happened to be literally a few days after the Kaseya incident. I'm sharing this with you all because Chris, you have, I don't want to use the words on the call, but he was interacting and often does with threat actors on their their channels with Reeville, and in this particular case, I don't know if you recall that, Chris, but I remember that very well, where you were going back and forth, and you have how should I say, a very direct way of dealing with the threat actors, and don't mind sharing what you think, and I think they respect that about you. Is that a fair statement? Over the years, they know who you are, and there's actually a sense of believe it or not, a sense of trust. Is that a ironic statement?
Yeah, I mean, you have to build a rapport. I mean, that's the number one thing that you have to do and understand it. And so, a lot of people will think they can just go in there and try to intimidate a threat actor and just be angry and, try to convince them that they're evil and that they're just a criminal and all that kind of stuff. That's not going to get you anywhere. So yeah, you just have to have a respectful conversation with them, and it's as easy as that to have actors. I mean,
Oh, I think we lost you just a little bit. Can you repeat that? You still there, Chris? Oh boy, I hope we still have him. Michelle, does it look like
Hopefully he just has us on mute while the airport announcement's going on.
I see on here. I don't know if he's having connection issues or background noise issues.
Chris, you okay there?
It looks like, Andrew, he could use the new Apple headsets that black out everything else but their voice, right?
Yeah, let me just see here. Let me just text him real quick, guys. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Hey, Chris.
I think we may have lost him.
Hopefully he'll reconnect. Hmm. That's not even going
This
through on.
it's bound to happen. It's raining in or in London now, I guess.
It's always raining in London, isn't it, Andy?
Right.
Okay. Well, while we're waiting, hopefully we get him back. I just want to share with you what we were going to plan on talking about today. And I think, you know, one of the interesting ones, you know, we're certainly going to look at IR preparation, you know, when you go direct versus incident. And Gary, you know, your customer, did they go directly to an IR firm, or was cyber in the middle of it? You're on mute, bud.
No, once we realized that the threat actor had a definitive access to the account, not knowing where they went, we advised them to call their cyber carrier, who basically brought in their forensics team.
Got it.
And they seem to be doing a good job so far based on everything I've seen, but don't know.
Got it. So Andy's got a question. Hopefully Chris will come back, but we actually just had somebody. Oh, here's Chris. Let me just a second see what he's saying. Trying to get it. Okay, he's trying to get on on a better network, and there's a few words here that I will hold off on mentioning because SaaS Alerts is being recorded. That he's discussing about his connectivity. But you know, Andy, typically warranties are you know, like literally just as the verbiage says, you know, and you're typically seeing these like with companies like SentinelOne, and now you have these organizations like a Cork. They are warrantying certain things, right, that within an environment, right, that have to be in place. And again, I'll probably ask Chris to validate this, Chip, or you're welcome to. Oh, there he is.
Chris is back.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Oh, much better, Chris.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I think I finished my thought on those, the threat actors. It's just, you know, my team, we used to have like one or two of us. We have seven.
This is disappointing. It's sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe
Chris.
just schedule Chris for next week.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, just to save him the frustration. I know how much I hate that when I'm in an airport trying to do a call and you just.
He's not actually in an airport. He's
Bus terminal.
he's at the he's actually at the CFC offices, but I think they were out somewhere at an event and he was trying to get connectivity. So, all right. Yeah, so Andy, the warranty is, you know, as I understand it, is there's a very specific subset, and I don't want to talk out of hand, right? So organizations, like there are some out there that we've talked about previously that still do some type of you know, telemetry, right? So if you look at like a SentinelOne, right, they're going to say that we will warranty you up to a certain amount of dollars, you know, if our EDR is in place and you're using it in a certain way and a threat actor gets involved. But they are very specific in terms of what they will and will not warranty. Whereas cyber insurance is going to be a much broader type of coverage if you have a good one, right?
Cork is what came up to mind here is the way that they're presenting things makes it interesting from an MSP perspective.
Yeah.
That's what came up why I asked the question.
Oh, okay. Got it. Anyway, what we were gonna, like, I just gonna say, and maybe, you know, see if this is germane to anybody on the call, and, you know, some really important things here around, you know, number one, and we can kind of just go around all of you here. Number one, first internally, you know, do you all have good IR preparation, right? And IR preparation is multifaceted. What are you talking about, Andy?
Well, I would like to think we would have it, but I'm coming to understand that it's a continually evolving process, kind of like what I was talking about with SaaS alerts. This is something that, as we become aware of new types of incidents, we have to deal with them, right? And they vary from customer to customer.
No doubt. No, yeah, no doubt. But first and foremost, let's even not even talk about our customers, but our own internal IR preparation. All right. And you know, when you talk to, I had Clark Harshberger on the cyber call, gosh, probably about a year ago. And he is the director of incident response for CrowdStrike. And one of the things he talks about, and I have this here is at a point 3, and I want to open this up to you all. You know, he talks about, you know, all good plans, right, go up in smoke when the real, you know, he's like, you know, for years and years I've been in this business, and everybody, you know, you'd like to think you have a great plan, but when the reality of an incident hits, he's like, you know, there's 3 things that you really need. And Chip, you just went through a major audit, so maybe you can talk about this. You can have done, you know, all of the tabletops in the world and have a great IR plan and all those things. But Andy, as you suggested, incidents are evolving and different all the time. And one of the 3 things he said that you must have are, number 1, hard copies, right? Because the reality is, if you're, you know, again, think about, you know, being locked out, right? You have no systems. So do you have hard copies? Do you have a really good phone tree? And, you know, who are your go-to people? You know, who's really hypothetically, who's really your awesome person when it comes to Azure? Who's your awesome person when it comes to your EDRs and things of that nature? And then, you know, your whole comms tree, and who's your backups, right, Chip? Like, if you're out on vacation or skiing, like you're typically half of the year, Chip, what's Jim going to do?
Half of the year. Holy cow. I can't wait until that comes around. Yeah, Andrew, I think you're hitting on some key points, and I'll share this from experience, going back to when I was running an MSP, then running a group of our own data centers before Azure and GCP and other stuff even existed, and running our software products out of that, which were SaaS products back then. I would change the order up slightly in terms of the most important things to have. The number 1 thing to have when you're actually literally are in an active incident is a great quarterback. You know, whoever it is that doesn't even need a copy of that plan, they know that plan inside and out, and they can quarterback the entire effort and communicate with all of the other lieutenants that are responsible for their respective, you know, domains. They're much tighter spheres. That's the most important thing to all of it. One guy who really knows the entire ins and outs of what that plan is supposed to do, and can kind of run the show on the communication side. I agree with you that in the list is absolutely, for most of the organization, access to hard copy, and the phone tree, absolutely essential. The most important person behind that quarterback is whoever it is who's tasked with communications to customers. That person's got to be fast on their feet. They have to really understand the plan, and they have to be one of those people that religiously wants to make sure and understands that over communicating is better than under communicating. Customers would rather hear from you every half hour saying there's nothing new than not hear from you for 4 hours, and then get, okay, well, in the last 4 hours there is something new. So I'll pause there. And
yeah, and let me just throw in one thing, and then let's turn it over and see if people have comments. That last piece on comms, I cannot stress enough, if you have customers involved, please, for whatever you're going to do before you start communicating to your customers, seek legal counsel, because anything you say, anything you put in writing is discoverable at that point. So you want to, number one, make sure that no one is speaking to your customers in your org without it first being sanctioned by that leader, that quarterback that Chip is referring to. Because like I said, once you open your mouth, or anybody in your organization opens their mouth, it's discoverable. And it will be held to you and against you if it's not the right things that you're communicating. Fair, Chip?
Absolutely. And I didn't want to imply that comms person is giving away detailed information about whatever interruption of service or event is going on. They're giving out general information that, hey, we know there's an event. We know that these customers may be impacted. Our engineering team is continuing to research. Our next update will be in 30 minutes. That's really all you're doing. And you're right. You can't go beyond that without specific authorization. And most of the time you can't go beyond it, even if you have authorization, even if you have an attorney that says, tell them everything you know. Well, the fact is, in the middle of an incident response, your technical team usually doesn't know, the what exactly happened, why did it happen, how it's going to be remediated, and what are you going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again. Those are the 4 things that everyone wants to know. Nobody knows that until the whole thing's wrapped up and you've completed your post-action analysis.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy, one sec, and Todd, we'll get to your comment. So one of the people we're going to have on the SASE call is Spencer Pollock also. And I think Enrique, you might have talked to him. He's a breach counsel. So he'll give us some really good pointers on this as well. So Andy, yours first, and then I'm going to read Todd's here.
Well, mine was, it sounds like we almost have to have a breach attorney on call. That'd be 1. And 2, this kind of framework that we're talking about would be a great part to include in onboarding that says, in the event that there's an incident, who's the point of contact, and here's how our protocol is. And for our techs, when does a issue escalate to an incident, and who's the trigger mechanism? How does this activate, right? Those are questions that came up for me.
So Todd, promise you're going to get to yours because you bring up a good one. Andy, you just brought up a multitude of awesome points. Not only probably one of the most important points to include in your agreements with your customers, which is what is included, what is standard work, and what is an incident. Because if there isn't a very clear delineation between, like Gary's situation, and I don't know if Gary, if you had that or can comment, but I really highly encourage all of you, if you have attorneys, I hope you do, good attorneys, in your agreements, there should be a clear demarcation between those 2 things, because if there is not, if there is a gray area between those, what's included and what's not included, what becomes billable by IR, et cetera, that can really come back to bite you. So
yeah, in this case, that was the first thing that happened when they called their carrier. Again, it was their incident, not ours. We got on with the attorney representing the carrier, and that's exactly said. Let's not say anything that you respond to an email, make sure you put privileged and confidential in the subject line so we know what it is, and let's figure out what it is, and then we'll figure out if anything needs to be said. But it wasn't their attorney, it was the carrier designated attorney in that event.
And it always is, by the way, they assign, the first thing that happens is a breach counsel,
Right.
is that's the quarterback. But the case, the ongoing case, and we talked about this one. I was just at the PAX 8 event, and Eric Tiltz talked about this on stage. He spoke about the ongoing case of the MSP that's getting sued by the law firm in California. And one of the things that the law firm, well, maybe it may not have been this case, but but just case in point, the law firm even was in, if it is this one, but looked into the regularity, like Gary, you're saying, hey, you know, it was their incident, it was their, you know, they clicked on a phishing link.
No, I meant that it was going through their carrier, not ours.
Yeah. No. I totally hear you. And it should go through their carrier. What I'm saying is just, it all comes back to what Andy was saying, what's kind of included and what's not included, and you know, in your onboarding, and when your agreement starts versus when it's signed, because that breach counsel for that customer might come back and go, yeah, Gary, it is your customer, it is their fault. They did click on the phishing link, but it says here you're providing security awareness training.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to look into now, are you doing the security awareness training regularly and documenting it like you said you were going to? Now, this isn't me getting on Gary. I'm just bringing this up, Gary, just for the audience to hear about where this can and often goes. Bringing this honestly full circle, Andy, to your point of onboarding and agreements, if that makes sense to everybody.
And defining who you call, right, at the customer when this initially occurs, and when the tech, what are the symptoms to escalate internally to your head quarterback, as Chip referred to him to, you know?
Absolutely.
And
So
then
let me
go
go.
ahead.
I was just going to say, let me just talk about Todd's point here, Todd. So Todd says, if that's the case, how do you know to deal with delays in communications between us and attorneys? Again, Todd, the whole point, you know, when your clients are calling is certainly, again, is to be responsive. But the verbiage is, you know, we are investigating this, you know, do you know what I'm saying? Without going into the what, right? We are actively investigating this. We will communicate with you regularly, right? As soon as we know more. Again, don't use my words, but is that kind of thing where we are engaging with our customers. We're letting them know we're doing everything we can. But, you know, as Spencer, when he comes on here, or your attorney, a good breach attorney, and as Andy said, yes, you all should have a relationship with a breach attorney, 150%. Yes, you should. Because that is the first call you guys should be making in the event of something bad happening internally in your organization.
Oh,
good.
I actually think we have to wind backwards, and we're in the process of doing this unrelated to this incident. Got to have an IR plan. You got to know who's doing what and when, and have it documented. And if you've got a relationship, that's one of the people in the list to contact.
And by the way, Gary, what is true about that, by the way, that security incident I was referring to, you guys all know the one I'm kind of referring to, the MSP that's getting sued in California by the law firm, vaguely. In the pleadings, there was something about them stating that they thought the customer, the MSP, had the incident response plan. Like they were responsible.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So and you would be surprised. Ben, I think you and I have talked about this over the years. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like if you did a poll, I think you polled 1,000 small businesses that dealt with MSPs and said, you know, who handles incident response? Like who's responsible for the plan? Ben, what percent you think would say they're MSP?
Oh, probably what, 98? I would assume that they automatically assume that you're protecting them against everything and anything on the internet. That's why I was always a big fan of setting expectations of this is what we cover, this is what we don't, so that you know.
Yeah. And Eric, I love what you just said. Eric V, do you have audio? Because that is fantastic,
Sure.
Especially in the event of any type of social engineering with email.
Right. Yeah. We put that in all of our incident response plans with our clients that we usually use, like, if they all have Apple, we use, or say Apple iMessage or using Signal, because even if, say, you're in an office with a VoIP system and there's ransomware in your network, do you trust your network enough to be making phone calls on it, and are you assured that that's secure? So having another way to communicate is always a good plan.
I couldn't, like out of band communication is
Yeah.
huge,
Yeah.
absolutely huge. And again, Andy, going all back what you said, I have to applaud you. That onboarding and that documentation piece and setting that expectations up front, and it'll actually make you guys stand out, right? Even if you were using this as a wedge in the sales process, I don't know if Jim's with us still. I mean, he might be on the golf course or ski slopes, depending on the year.
No, I'm here. I'm here.
But he's on the boat, Andrew.
Oh, okay.
Oh, look, you see me on camera. I'm right here on my desk.
But that's a virtual.
I'm going to have to jump to a call here, actually.
We know how backgrounds work. I'm not sure what that means.
But Jim, right? You know, using this in the up front, like as a differentiator. Let me, you know, they're your competitors 150, you're 225. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Let me walk you through the why. You know, why that's so different, you know, about, you know, and a lot of that has to do with preparation that we did.
Yes. Look, this is one of the core pieces of the SaaSonomics model, which is a lot of you are already doing incident response or on the hook for incident response. You can actually create an incident response protection plan where you get paid for that up front. And then if incident happens, then you're on the hook to make sure that, you know, everything goes as planned. But from what, you know, talking to a lot of larger MSPs, this is something where they're making significant money off of it because people are paying for it.
Well, it sounds like it's back in the original BDR days where you charged a moderate amount of money for all-in services and hoped only one or two people had any sort of a disaster each year, and everybody's contributing to the fund. It worked.
100%. So, you know, this is the way you message it is, look, the average incident is going to cost the average company at least $20,000. So because you're on our existing stack, we're going to be able to offer you a protection plan. And that's going to be $1,000 a month. So that's $12,000 a year versus what could potentially be 20. But, you know, it's the same reason why I'm buying an iPhone for my son, my 19-year-old son. I always get the protection plan because I'm hopeful that nothing's going to happen to his phone, but I'm also at the same time cognizant of the possibility that it could happen.
Yeah, and so Todd, insurance to handoff, don't touch anything further. Todd, can you clarify your question? Did the insurance company tell you an MSP's hands off, don't touch anything further?
Yeah, we've had insurance companies, actually TechRug actually tell us that we need to get our clients' insurance companies to give us a red line on our interaction when an incident happens. So essentially telling us where we should not proceed so that we don't disqualify their claim.
Yeah, look, probably the best company, and I'll go nameless on this organization, this MSP, that probably did it really, really well. They in their agreements with their customers, they literally talk to they literally talk about you know, how incidences work with their customers. What is IT? What's an IT event, Todd? And what's an incident? And they talk about the steps in an IT event, and that when their techs suspect any type of nefarious type of work that is beyond the scope of normal, and you know, they define normal as, you know, day in, day out IT operations, right? And again, I'm giving you the high level, but hopefully this makes sense, that they will call in a third party they have a relationship with an incident response firm. They talk about that incident response firm will bill the customer. It is out of band in the agreement, and they will use typically they say it's a typical 1 hour assessment. It will cost you about $600. And at that point, if it is deemed that there's nothing nefarious, Todd, it gets turned back right into an IT event, right? If the is deemed nefarious, then it's escalated, right? Like in Gary's case, to the insurance firm of that customer. And then at that point, one of the other, I think, comments and questions in the chat is, absolutely, you should stop working the incident. And the breach coach counsel, right, is going to be immediately signed. That is the first person. And you will wait for directive, right, by the breach coach. And certainly you should have one as well. So breach counsel to breach counsel, talking to each other, who should be doing what. Typically what happens, Ben, I know you're shaking your head, I love your comment. So the breach counsel is going to say, we're using Kroll. Now the Kroll team is going to come in probably remotely, and they might say, hey, Gary, we need your tech. Can he do this, this, and this? Or can she do this, this, and this? Ben, what's your experience there? Does that sound in line with what you've dealt with?
Luckily, I have been very fortunate in that arena, especially at my last MSP. But I remember attending a Ride of Boom when you were in Texas, and that opened my eyes to us at a breach coach. That's amazing. That's something that we just didn't have. I think it was always just kind of fly by the seat of your pants, which is a lot of MSPs do. Is they count their blessings they haven't had an incident, and when one happens, they're kind of caught off guard.
Mm-hmm.
So the majority of the MSPs that I've worked for, we never had any of that. But it's great advice.
So Eric, you guys are a bigger MSP. Have you guys dealt with that at all? Just curious on any of those demarc lines and turning it over to breach counsel and a team. Eric V.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've seen that before where there's you want to contain the event, and once we have it contained where we know that it's not spreading anymore, that's usually when we say stop and wait for instruction from whoever else who's ever taking over from the IR firm or from the insurance company.
Yeah.
Eric,
awesome.
did you have a third party that you were using for that sort of thing, or was it mostly internal?
It varies. Usually, on bigger cases, it's a third party that's coming in.
Yeah, but I think someone made that comment. Eric, your point is like, look, once you've gotten to the point where you've contained or engaged, right, the customer's breach coach, that's where, again, the more you do, and if Chris was on here, without being informed what to do, that's where we as MSPs can get ourselves into trouble once it's been turned over.
Yeah, and I've had to tell clients too, you need to stop because you're making things worse for yourself right now, and you need to stop, and we need to wait and do this in the appropriate order. So.
And that the last comment, I guess, in closing here for the day, Eric, I think is a really important one. Again, getting back to setting expectations and differentiation. Look, there may be times where I'm going to have, in the event, like let's talk about worst case scenario. We hope it never happens. But I'm going to come to you and say, stop working. Right. And the reason I'm going to come to you and say, stop working is because we want to make sure we are not giving the threat actor more information or contaminating any evidence that can help us mitigate, the size and scope of this incident. So
the virtual police tape.
That's right. That's right, Chip. That's really what it is. All right. So I know we're at the top of the hour. I'm going to try to get, I think I'm going to be able to get Spencer here next Thursday. So that'll be awesome. And then we'll see if we can get Chris the following week. Any closing comments there, Chip?
No, good call. I love these. You know, I like it when we have kind of roundtable discussions and get a lot of input from different experiences that have been real world that you know our partners have had and this community has had. So it's outstanding stuff. I won't be with you next week, Andrew, or the week after. We're about heading off into the wilderness soon, unplugged for a bit.
Nice. Yeah, I knew it was either skiing, hunting, you know.
But hope everybody has a great week, and I'll see you guys in early July.
Awesome. All right, everybody, have a great one.
Have a great
Bye,
day.
everyone.
See ya.